This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through custom Trace Audio cables and the new Empirical Labs pump compressor mixed through Isotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, Nectar, and Plasma, all mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I probably switched to Reaper maybe 5-6 years ago. I think all the updates and changing company, I think Gibson bought them, and it was just getting weird for me. And I was like, I'm recording rock bands. I don't need to do any sequencing and stuff. If I'm going to involve that kind of stuff, I usually sub it out. You know, I know some people that are really good at that stuff. And in my world, in the contracting world, that's what you do. That's how you get a good product, I think.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. At Isotope, saturation just got a whole lot smarter. Introducing the new Isotope Plasma plugin to supercharge your sound by giving your tracks exactly what they need, precisely when and where they need it. Unlike traditional saturators that apply a static effect, Plasma's groundbreaking flux saturation technology analyzes your sound and applies dynamic processing, adding targeted warmth, depth, and character to bring out the best in your mixes and masters. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the new Plasma or any of the awesome plugins at isotope.com. Atom Audio proudly announces the D3V active desktop monitors and H200 dynamic closed-back studio headphones, designed in Berlin for pro-level monitoring in home studios. The D3V features 3.5-inch woofers with ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact design ideal for songwriters and producers. The D3V includes USB-C and balanced analog inputs, a headphone output, and DSP room acoustics. The H200 closed-back headphones feature powerful 32-ohm drivers and comfortable ear pads in a durable metal construction, making them perfect for studio or portable use. The included plugin enhances tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot at atomaudio.com. Howdy, rock stars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals and sometimes super fans of the podcast, too, so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Tex Cokley, a music producer and mixer in Southwest Washington State. He's been producing and mixing rock songs and albums for bands for the last 15 years. As a musician, he's versed in different instruments and works with many studio musicians as well. Now, I met Tex and his friend Alex at NAMM a couple of years ago. This is, of course, the big conference that we love to go out to in Anaheim, California. Usually it's in January. Tex came to our first Recording Studio Rockstars meetup out there at NAMM. This was actually one that I hosted with Colin Dupuis, who was there also a couple of years ago. I always love connecting with fans of the podcast, aka the Rockstars, at any event at any point at which I can, or online when we get to do it in comments or live streams and things like that. And Tex is definitely one of them. He's got a great rock band called Opticus and balances recording music with a busy career also as an electrician and a family guy. His enthusiasm and dedication to making records and attending, trekking across the country to NAMM each year, and the fact that Recording Studio Rockstars as a podcast has been able to reach out and help fans like Tex make great records is what inspires me to make this show and keep bringing you these interviews every week. Tex's credits include powerful rock bands like Forever Dethroned, Rust and Chrome, and his band Opticus, and many others, which you can hear in the playlist. So please scroll down and check that out, because these are some really great sounding heavy rock records. Please welcome Matt Tex Cokley to Recording Studio Rockstars. Tex, are you ready to rock, dude?
Yes, sir. Ready to rock. Lidge, that was awesome.
Glad to have you here, man.
Glad to be here.
So I met you a couple of years ago. I guess when we were out at NAMM, that was really the first time. Had we met before that and I'm not remembering it?
No, we haven't. I believe it was 2019, right before the COVID thing happened.
Yeah, right.
Got 1 year in there. And yeah, I saw you on the main floor next to the bathrooms, kind of on your phone. And I came and intruded you, introduced myself, and couldn't believe it was you. I was like, there's Lidge.
Right on, dude. Well, I'm glad you did. It's really fun to meet both you and Alex. And then, this past NAMM, when we did a meetup, there was a really great turnout. And it was just an awesome party. So Rockstars, if you ever get a chance to come out to any of these events, just keep your ears peeled. Our email list is a great way to stay in the loop on all that. And you can always sign up over at mixmasterbundle.com, which you'll hear about on the show too. So Tex, give us a little bit of background to you and your music. I see the video right now because we're on a Zoom chat. And if we're on video, then Rockstars, you'll see this as well. But if you're listening on the podcast, then we'll sort of talk about the setup and everything. But it looks like you got a cool studio set up there. Tell us a little bit about, where you are and your interest in music, and then getting to the point of making these great sounding records.
Yeah. So, I grew up in a little town called Astoria, a little east of where I'm at now. It's actually in Oregon. I live right on the Columbia River, and right on the border of Oregon and Washington, in the northwest corner. So
is Columbia River the one that just kind of, it winds its way all the way down to the ocean? It just keeps descending until you finally get to the...
Yes.
That's sort of what I remember from driving through there years ago.
Yeah. Oh, you've been here. Cool. Yeah. It's a
well, we
place.
drove from Minneapolis. My brother and I drove from Minneapolis all the way out to Portland, Oregon once.
Geez, that's a trek.
Yeah, it was. But I remember feeling like it's a fascinating, like, long state where I felt like the sky was really close when we started, and then it just descended, through the river gorge, down to the coastline. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, it's about 45. The mouth is about 45 minutes from my house here. So I grew up more near the ocean. Grew up in a sports family. My dad was my basketball coach. Got a chance to play some college basketball. So I guess from a young age, I was probably 13. I remember this. I'm going to break right into the story here. I was about 13, and I remember we were getting ready to go somewhere as a family. And I came up, we used to live in this big log cabin, and I came up the stairs.
Wow.
My dad had this really badass Bose 902 stereo system.
I totally remember those.
Yeah, it was a great stereo. And this was a time when CDs were kind of really prevalent. And I just remember he had that Nirvana Nevermind record on, and it was blaring up in our big living room. And, we were getting ready to go somewhere, just summer day. And I said, Dad, what is that? What's that sound? What's making that noise? And he's like, oh, that's electric guitar. And that was it. That was like, I got to have one of those. And so that Christmas, I asked for one, and I got one. And
what was your first? Yeah. What would you choose?
I didn't choose. I said, I asked for it for Christmas, and my mom did her best she could to pick it out. And it was a Tenera. The brand is Tenera, and it's basically a Strat ripoff. Just a real cheap Strat.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. You don't want to buy a Les Paul right out of the gate, or a real Strat. My mom wanted to kind of see if I liked it.
How often was Kurt Cobain playing a Strat? I don't really remember. I remember the, what was it, like the Jazz Stang or something like that, right?
I think it was more that. I don't think he really played them too often. I mean, maybe live a few times. I think there's a show in Seattle at the Showbox, maybe, that he's got one, but I could be wrong there.
Right. And of course, that music was kind of local for you, although you might not have known it at the time.
Yeah, I was kind of a little bit oblivious to it, but it was very local. Seattle from Astoria is probably, 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But, Kurt grew up in Aberdeen. And actually on that subject, the bass player, Chris Novoselic, he lives about 40 minutes from here in Wahkiakum County, right down the
right on.
right down the road.
Well, Strat's a good starter guitar. Mine is probably a lot better than mine. My first electric was a Kramer Striker 100 ST, and it was like, it had a hockey neck, a hockey stick neck on the end.
Yeah.
And real pointy, and one pickup. It had one knob, just one volume knob, and like
How'd
a
it
Floyd
sound?
Rose tremolo, none of which I needed. Probably pretty terrible. But I mean, that was my fault as well.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun to have an electric guitar for the first time. Didn't stop me and my brother from jamming in the garage until my dad would tell us to shut up.
Yeah. I was terrible. Expectedly, I used to lay it across my lap, because I didn't know how to hold it.
Oh, yeah.
And I had this little Yamaha amp that wouldn't have any gain on it. And so, my mom knew I wanted that sound. And so she got me a Metal Zone Boss pedal, so I could, it just was terrible sound. It was just blurry, but I didn't know how to tune it. I didn't know how to do anything. So because I was so involved in sports and everything, it just kind of sat in the corner, and I just would look at it. And then one time, pretty recent after that, maybe a year or two, I was about 15. I went over to a friend's house across the road. I had to cross the highway and walk through this field. And he was a good friend of mine, and his older brother had a guitar, and I could hear him in the other room. It sounded completely different than mine. And I was like, man, that's that Nirvana sound. And so I went in there. He's older, and I was a little scared, and I knocked on his door, and he was really nice. And I was like, how are you playing that? And he showed me the shape of a power chord and how to tune a guitar. And that was it. That was the beginning.
You probably saw like an open G chord or C chord somewhere, and you strumming that and like, quang,
Not even that. I didn't even know how to tune it. It was just like, man, this doesn't sound like Nirvana. This is terrible. I'm going to put this thing away. But that my buddy's friend, he showed me how to, like, okay, this is the 5th fret and you tune the string below. And he showed me it, and I picked up on it pretty quick. And so I at least could do that. And then then he showed me, once he did that, he showed me that shape of a power chord, how to, play the root and the 5th. And that was it. I was home power chording for hours. And then I could figure out the Nirvana songs, and gosh, now I was Kurt Cobain. I felt like this is easy. I'm on my way.
Do you remember the earning your calluses phase of playing guitar at the beginning there?
Yeah, it had to be right around that time, because I played all the time and my fingers started hurting pretty bad, and then played through it, and then it was like, they don't hurt anymore.
It's bizarre to me that calluses, they come and go, but in general, it feels like once you earn your calluses, like you never go back to ground zero again. Like I could not play guitar for a long time and pick it up and it wouldn't hurt my fingers like it did the very first time.
Yeah, it's like your fingers remember this. They're like, oh, okay, I remember this. We're not going to callus up this time.
Yeah, maybe you just kill off all the nerves in your fingers. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that was cool. So you got into the power chord thing. Do you remember any specific amp distortion pedal combos that were like, the light bulb going off for that sound, or was it more just learning the power chord?
Yeah, it was. I played with that amp for a while in that setup, and then, gosh, it was so long ago, but I believe I got this. My next amp I got was a game changer, and it was a Behringer amp, actually, and it was a 212 combo that had some onboard effects and stuff, but the crunch sounded really good on it, and I'm kind of slipping on what the model was. I feel like it was 2 letters, a dash, and 3 numbers. But I actually recorded a lot of stuff, early Optica stuff. I would use that amp occasionally to, I would do I later got a Mesa dual rectifier, which is directly behind my computer right now.
Oh, nice.
And, I would do all my main tracks with that, but I would always cut up the middle with a weird amp. Like I got this, you probably can't see it. I don't want to mess with the camera, but I got a little tiny Marshall down here. It's got maybe a 6 or an 8-inch speaker. I think it's called an MG50. That's kind of a story in itself, but I record with that a lot down the middle. I'll put a bass guitar through it when I'm like, I'll double track the guitars, and then just to get a weird nosy sound, I'll play a bass guitar through that little thing and mic it up.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I definitely want to be talking to you about guitars and bass recordings because the stuff sounds great. And I like to hear you use adjectives to describe the sounds because it's kind of how I think about it too. You know, you called it a nosy sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it, right? It's like, do you like to think about all the sounds when you're recording as like little characters, you know?
I do. Yeah. I'm kind of like jumping all over the place here, but I don't know when that set in, but it definitely did. It was a turn of when my recording started to sound more, they'd have my own stamp on it rather than, trying to mimic other people.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hear a technique and then you go try and like, oh, I tend to do that and then modify to where I like it, so.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So you did the band thing and everything. Now, did you ever go through a phase of thinking you wanted to do music and recording professionally, like at full time, or did you keep it in the like in the hobby, the kind of interest category? Because you're also like a full-time electrician, isn't that right?
I am. I'm actually an electrical contractor. I own my own company. I'm a union contractor. Fairly recent thing, but yeah, I've been an electrician for 20 years. My dad
and
was a contractor.
did you ever like weigh one choice versus the other, or was it like you thought of one thing as a career and you thought of the other thing as a musical passion?
I did, and I've been doing it for a long time, and I still am up in the air, and I wish I could make the jump, but for me, especially in the last 10 years, maybe even 15 years, I'm not very good at being online and being present online, probably because my life is so busy. I really feel like you got to dedicate a lot of time to that to be top of mind to people. And that just has never been my gig, even with our band,
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bailout or anything. The two other guys I work with constantly are family guys as well, and they both have great jobs. Alex is who you had mentioned is an electrician as well. So it was just very hard. We tried to do that, and I feel the same way about the studio. Yeah, I'm not out like hustling clients, or
Mm-hmm.
clients is a weird word, but artists, to work with. So I just kind of get little word of mouth things, and I'm busier now with this stuff than ever, but I'm also busier with my real job than ever.
Well, I think there's like different phases we can all go through. There are times where we feel really motivated to like hustle the music and the recording. And then there are other times where life seems like it's in pretty good balance and the music feels like it's just enough,
Yeah. Yeah. I listen to, a lot of guests on here and other podcasts, and I just always wonder, like, how do they do that? How do they get enough work to, because I feel like the recording's good and everybody that comes through here is, they're super happy and everything. Mm-hmm. So I just never know how to make that leap. And
what do you think? What do you think your takeaway is from the many podcasts you've heard? Do you feel like you can kind of sum up what you think has worked for people at all?
I don't think there's one real answer because everybody's, there's some people that come on that don't have any kids or any other obligations, which is great. And sometimes I'm listening and I'm like, man, but I love I couldn't imagine my life any other way without my two kids. I got an 11 and 12-year-old and a wife that has a great job. She actually works from home. It's a very good situation. So to put all that and kind of try to do this, I feel like I could carve it out and do it. It would be a pretty big risk, but if you don't risk, you don't really. I would love to record and mix and produce and work with bands every day. I mean, I think the producing is what I would be the strongest at, is really getting in with an artist and really connecting with them. I usually only take things that I'm into. If I can't really get into the music, it's a disservice, and I'm not at a point where I need to do this to pay my bills,
Right.
So,
it's an interesting situation when you can put yourself in a financial stability so that you can be really selective and choose the records you really want to work on. I mean, I feel like we were talking about that recently on the podcast, that, some of the advice was that choosing to work on to fewer records, choosing to work on fewer things to try and make them really sound great was a better move than working on tons of stuff that you never really get into.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you have thoughts about that? Have you experienced a little bit of both?
Yeah, I've experienced a little bit of both. I mean, early on, I was so excited to do this that I did take some stuff it wasn't my cup of tea, but certainly had a blast doing it, and would do it again. Some of the artists I've kind of grown with as well. And for me, the ultimate thing is, it's even past the music, is what was the experience like that they had, and are they going to remember it forever? Are we going to, it's just beyond the music. So
yeah.
I don't know if that sounds a little earthy or what, but to me, that's what it's about, is connecting with an artist, hearing what they want to do, getting on that same waveform as they usually invite me into the process. I give my strong opinions. And then, I try to have a lot of fun. I mix it up. I live out kind of up on a hill here, nice green, open areas. I got a nice fire pit. We'll go out there and I can drag microphones out there and record out there and just make
That's
it
cool.
a fun.
Have you done that? Have you done some, like acoustics around the fire pit or anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We do stuff. I got a nice open area up here with a fire pit up above me. I got a nice open gazebo area.
How does it sound if you do acoustics around a fire pit? I don't think I've ever done that.
It's a lot more open, obviously, because you got a lot of space.
It's kind of dead sounding, right? Because there's no walls.
Which is kind of weird. Yeah, there's no reflections.
What about, I have noticed at times that the crackles of a fire, they're kind of like tambourines and stuff, like where they get in everything.
Yeah, when I'm going to do something like that, it's usually just like an intimate, acoustic and a microphone, but the fire isn't really crackling. We're just kind of out there for the setting, just being outside, just because of that exact reason.
Right on. You used the word earthy before. When you say earthy, this is a little silly, but when you say earthy, are you thinking in the context of like woo-woo crystals, or are you thinking in the context of the electrician's version of earth and ground and electricity?
Definitely.
And is it really the same thing?
No, I was just referring to getting a little, like, it's almost a spiritual thing for me when I'm in here working with an artist, that kind of thing. Probably the wrong choice of words, but
but that does make me want to ask you if your background in electrical contracting, have you found that really useful as a studio builder too? Like, do you sort of know how to wire up a studio in a way that gives you some confidence?
I do. Yeah, it's really not even close to the same thing as far as electricity goes, but the theory of like plugging into something and coming back out of it and the signal gets processed, a patch bay, like all that, I just taught myself all that just from, poking around online. And maybe some other people that don't have that background, it would be a little more hard to put all that stuff together, but that stuff's been very easy to me. I built this room down here. When we moved into this house, it was non-usable. So I built it all out.
Was this like a basement space or something like that?
Yeah, it was just a concrete floor, kind of like stud walls. Like people probably stored stuff down here, but I finished it,
Talk a little bit about that, because sometimes that can be really interesting to the rock stars. So like, when you went down, you said it's not necessarily very usable. So did it feel even like kind of gross and funky in a basement? And then you had to figure out, all right, I'm going to clean this up, build in here and transform it?
Yeah. So exactly. This was just a concrete floor, and it would flood. Like, it gets wet around here, and I live on a hill. So it's coming down this hill and it would come into the cinder,
Wow.
base.
So what were some ways that you could deal with that? I mean, what do you want to say about all that? Because these are great, very, very realistic issues that everybody has to think about. I've had to think about it. I still do.
Yeah, no, it is real. And it was a really bummer because I knew I wanted to put my studio down here. So I actually paid a significant amount of money to put a sump pump over here in this corner. And then I framed around it and really, really good company came in, and I just did it right because I knew I wanted the studio down here. It's about the only place I could put it. And so
what does the sump pump do? Just generally speaking, for somebody who hadn't heard that word before.
Yeah. So the sump pump is, it's a basin. It's a big, kind of like if you can imagine like a garbage can looking thing, but it's heavier duty. And what they did is they cut into this concrete floor. It's a 6-inch slab, and they cut into it in the corner to a collection point where the water, if it's running down the side of my house, my foundation, it tends to collect in the lowest spot, and it's got a bunch of holes in it. And so it'll go in this basin, and at the bottom of the basin, there's going to be a pump with a cord that comes up, and I got an outlet because I'm an electrician. I put an outlet in.
Is the pump inside the basement, or is it outside the basement?
It's inside of it, but it's super, super quiet. And to be honest with you, I've never heard it run. I just know there's no water here ever.
But I mean, like when we think about stuff like that, it's like water comes down a hill towards the basement wall or something like that, where our studio is going to be on the other side of. And that water ultimately like kind of goes down under the foundation and then will like seep back up through the floor to puddle up in a basement. Is that sort of a good way to think about it, you think?
Yeah, water's trying to get to the lowest point, right? It's coming down, and so if you cut in a basin that's lower than everything, it will seek that. So all the water that was going to come into your room will go to that place. You're kind of like, and also something else I just thought of too, when they did this, they put a gutter. It's like a little plastic gutter. Maybe it was metal. I can't remember. It's small, but it goes around the toe footing of the room. And so if the water ever does come in there, it gets in that gutter and runs down towards that basin. So they're kind of directing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very clever. Like I said, we put this in maybe 6 years ago, and I haven't seen a trace of water.
That's great.
I don't even think about it anymore. And that's what I was paying for, is just, I don't want to think about that. I want to record music, and, I don't want bands to see water on the floor, and, so we just did it right.
And your gear and stuff too. So that's really encouraging. So Rockstars, if you've got a space and you're thinking it'd be great, but it just sort of seems gross when you walk into it initially, like most of our basements would, unless they're already perfectly sealed and dry. It's really encouraging to hear that there are these solutions that can be worth doing. Yeah. And that you really can get away with putting a studio downstairs. I would also add that one of the other things to think about when we think about a studio in the basement is just a simple question. Are there water pipes running in through the ceiling right above our studio underneath the first floor? Because those might actually be more threatening to us. We might want to make sure that all that's in good shape.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Water flooding from the rain, for example.
Yeah, fortunately for me, above us is just a deck, and I built that as well. So
right on.
I had it all torn apart, and it's just insulation and wood. So I got none of that, that's a really good point.
Empirical Labs, creators of the famous Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio pros. The Fatso adds warmth to digital recordings with harmonic generation, tape emulation, and compression. The Pump, a 500 series compressor, features 8 selectable ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, and an attack mod for incredible transient control. The Arouser and Big Freak plugins are also available at empiricallabs.com, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle, featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects. Perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Do you know anything? Well, did you have to learn about ground loops? And do you feel like you could explain what that is?
Yeah. Well, this is kind of weird as an electrician. A ground loop I still struggle with it because, I'll find out about them sometimes in a recording and I'm like, gosh, dang it. I just want to drive my own ground rod and ground everything out there. But how I combat that is I have two circuits down in my room and most of our gear doesn't draw a ton of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just come out of the same thing. I have two plugs on the same circuit and I have a couple, just good power strips and power conditioners. And I just come out of the same thing and it avoids all that. And so, like sometimes when I'm tracking guitar, I ran into this when I'm tracking guitar, I got an AB box. So, I come into the AB box, come out with A will be like my DI that goes straight into the interface, or the preamps. And then B will go to an amp, which goes to an ISO room, right? And then we're micing it up. So I'll have sometimes 3 tracks. And a lot of times you'll get a lot of hum on that DI or the amps. And you're like, what the heck's going on? But if I got my amp plugged into a different circuit, that's where you'll get into trouble. So if you're ever wanting to eliminate that, just come off of the same circuit with everything and you'll be good.
All right. Good to know. Yeah. I bet it was a little frustrating for you to discover like the idea of a ground loop that's not even a thing in just power electricity, right? It's just an audio kind of issue, isn't it?
Well, in AC, in AC current, you want, your grounds all tied together and coming back to a common point, right? So if there's a fault ever, it's going to go directly to those ground rods. That's what you want as a loop. So, but in audio, like I said, I don't really understand, inside the electronics, it's grounded to the chassis, how you get interference, and I know there's cords and stuff that can eliminate that or hum eliminators.
Well, I think it's generally the idea that if you have a circuit, like you've got 2 different pieces of gear or many different pieces of gear, and they are directly connected to power and to ground, but then they're also connected to each other, then it becomes this sort of loop. And what can happen is through the connection to each other, they might have a little resistance at one piece of gear going down to ground. And so then all of a sudden it becomes like a circuit. So now you've got a signal of the ground noise showing up on the gear. But that's my very rough
I wonder how much
understanding of it.
DC, because a lot of times when we're going to pedals and stuff, you're converting to DC, and
Right.
I wonder how much that has to play with it too, because DC and AC are completely different types of voltage.
One thing I've noticed, I mean, I think there are definitely things studios can do when you're building to try and avoid them. But one thing I've noticed is every studio I've ever been in, whether it was a home studio or the highest level pro studio, we were dealing with ground loops. And really the solution is when you inevitably hear a buzz in something, what do you do next, And so in my experience, the answer is you can do a 3-prong to 2-prong adapter, and put an actual ground lift on the power cable of a piece of gear and see if that fixes it. A DI box might have a ground lift switch on it. You can flip that and see if that fixes it. The patch bay can cause that problem. And sometimes just actually swapping out cables in places will help because maybe the cable doesn't have a good ground connection and you're trying to get a better ground connection, especially in guitar chords. Guitar chords can really make a difference.
Have you ever heard of
then sometimes I just slam the guitar pedal down on the ground, which is a terrible idea.
Oh, that doesn't work?
Sometimes it does.
Have you ever heard of the fork or the spoon and the sock with the gator clips to the guitar bridge?
No, that sounds like some kind of torture device.
Check it out. I've never tried it. I tried to do it, and I feel like it did work a little bit when you clip
what is it? Yeah.
You take it sounds silly. You can probably YouTube this, but you take a fork or a spoon, and I believe you stick it in your sock, down toward your shoe, so it's against your body. You stick a gator clip on that, and then the top of the gator clip onto like the bridge, and supposedly it eliminates.
Oh, right. You're grounding the guitar itself.
Yeah, it seems sketchy,
actually,
though.
we did that recently. Actually, we just did an overdub, and I think it was a guitar overdub, and we were getting a buzz. And then the way that I noticed it is every time the guitar player grabbed the strings with his hands, the buzz went away, and every time he lifted his fingers, then it was like bzzz. And so that is a good indicator, rock stars. If you experience that, then it makes you think, okay, well, you can't both grab the strings the whole time and play the guitar. So maybe we can just take like an extra cord and connect the metal of the strings or the bridge on the guitar and also like touch it to the body of the player somehow.
Yeah.
And that can help.
You're out of when you're dealing with that stuff, gosh, you're out of the reason why you're there, These are all really good things and everyday battles for me. It seems like the more hours you put into this stuff, you can troubleshoot things. I mean, that's part of the job, is just being able to troubleshoot really fast, and on the ground loop stuff, for me, the game changer was just coming out of the same thing, coming out of the same circuit with everything. It looks a little weird when you got your pedal board plugged in, your computer. It sounds kind of scary. But, like I said, a lot of these loads that we're running are very small. You got a 20 amp circuit usually. You can load that thing up really heavy and you're not going to have any problems, Yeah. Anytime you're plugging in something with heat, whether it's a heater, a toaster, a hair dryer, you're drawing a lot of load, and every piece of equipment that you look at will have a nameplate rating on it, and it should say what kind of amps it draws. So just figure a typical outlet is a 20 amp circuit. Sometimes they're 15, but if you're not loading that thing up near 15 amps, 20 amps, you're going to be good. So
my studio used to be entirely running off a 15 amp circuit because I used to have it upstairs in the house, including the tape machine and the console and all the mic pre's.
Did you ever have a
Guitar
problem?
amps were usually in a different room though, so that I guess they were doing something. Oh yeah, and I'd blow it every time I vacuumed up there. I'd blow the circuit.
Vacuums draw to like 12 amps. So there you go. They're a big heater motor.
There you go. Don't vacuum the studio. That's going to be the intro clip right there. All right. Well, that's cool, man. And it's cool to hear you talk about this stuff because, of course, you know what you're talking about when you start talking about, circuits and stuff like that. There's another expression called the star ground, which I'll give this credit out to Jesse Newport, who did the Bonnaroo studio with me for many years, and we worked together in the studio a lot. He would always talk about trying to set up everything, and I think that essentially was, like you said, it's like one power strip going into one circuit, and then all the other power strips are going into that. So it's kind of like, I think of it more as tentacles, branches of a tree, but I think that's kind of the thinking.
Yeah, he's probably dealing with a big studio. This studio here is, I got, what is it? Maybe 15 by 20 foot room.
Well, tell us more about your studio. What are some of the gear that you use? I think you mentioned to me that you're not recording in Pro Tools, but you're actually using Reaper. Is that right?
I am, yeah.
So tell us about that, man. What's awesome about Reaper?
I originally was a Cakewalk user, so I got into digital audio kind of early. It's kind of a cool story if you don't mind me sharing it.
This is your show, dude.
Right on.
Every cool story is a yes.
So about that time back, let's get back to where the 16-year-old me cruised through high school, was playing a lot of sports. Like I said, fortunate enough to go to college, continue playing basketball. So while in college, I was writing a lot of music too. But I had never played with a drummer. It was just me and I had my dual rectifier at the time, and it sounded awesome. So I would just crank it up and play. Then I met this girl and started hanging out with her and dating her. Her cousin, named Logan White, who, spoiler alert, is the drummer singer of Opticus, she introduced me to him, and he was a super badass drummer, still is, and all my riffs I now heard with a drummer, and it blew my mind. I was like, he completely just knew where I was, and he was way more advanced.
Was this one of the first times you got to play with somebody else?
It was the very first time, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a big game changer when you're learning guitar, when you start, or any instrument, when you actually just start playing with other people?
Yeah,
Because
that was it,
Because it's
man.
a big difference. What do you remember about the difference about things you thought worked by yourself versus what worked when you played along with somebody else?
Well, the biggest thing is the impact when the kick and the snare would hit, because I knew when I'm playing these riffs, these rock riffs, I knew there were supposed to be hits there, but it's just me and my guitar. And then hearing him fill those in with not some crazy fill, he was doing exactly what I was thinking. And it was like so impacting, when you're downbeating together and it was just guitar and drums and it sounded great,
Yeah.
I didn't even know the dynamic of what a bass guitar could do to that situation, So I'm stumbling through this and he's excited. And we put this song together that sounded really good. When you're jamming with a guy in a loud room, there's only so much you can hear. Like it sounds cool. Well, that same girl on the other side of her family had a cousin that they kind of all worshipped because he was working in LA. He was a producer and he was working with, I believe he was working like Powerman 5000 as a band, Rob Zombie's brother's band.
Yeah.
And then there's a gal here. There's a girl that had a really big song. I believe it was called like I'm a Bitch. Their name was, keep wanting to say Michelle Branch, but it's not Michelle Branch. It's Meredith Brooks is her name. He was working with her doing a record. So he had been in some major label situations. He knew his way around. And this is probably early 2000s, really early 2000s. And I just called him up. She gave me his number. I called him up and I said, hey, would you be interested in recording a song? And so he said, yeah, come on down. And I went to his studio and it was in this big house in Portland. And we went down these stairs and it was like a spacecraft. Lights everywhere. And that was it for me. I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. And we went in and we started laying this thing down and he was directing us on what to do. That was my first introduction to digital audio, which was, I feel like still fairly new at the time, early 2000s. I know people were using it maybe in the 90s, but I saw Pro Tools and a guy that was very proficient at it. And he started layering the song together and I heard my song in headphones and in monitors for the first time. And I could not believe it, how he was directing this together. And this thing that was in our head in this jam room has now got like really professional treatment. Blew my mind. That was the day I went, I'm no longer in the band. I want to do what that guy's doing. I want to feel the way I feel. I want to do that for other people. And so that was it for me. I got Cakewalk. I know I'm kind of circling back to the Reaper user, but
no, it's good. It's good.
I got Cakewalk. I went into the local music store where I lived in Astoria and I saw it hanging up on the wall and I knew it was similar to Pro Tools. So I just got it and had no clue what I was doing. Didn't even know what it was. Maybe took me a month to figure out how to get a microphone signal, or a DI signal, I was just playing my guitar through it. But it was cool. Me and my friends would make all these funny little things, but that was my introduction to recording. And then from there, that Rob guy got a little too busy for us, so he referred us to some other people, really cool people in Portland, and they were doing a similar thing. And I saw more and more. And I remember the second guy I went to, he looked at me, he's like, you're going to be doing this one day. And I was like, the thought of that, I saw all his gear and I was like, there's no way. I mean, I kind of knew a little bit about gear. I think he had some distressors and I knew the price on those. And I'm like, it just seems so insurmountable to get to that point. So, but here we are, I got distressors and I got 1176s and, I got the stuff and it's great, but gear isn't everything for sure.
Yeah, but you're right. Gear isn't everything and you don't need a bunch of gear to start out. You do need something to record with. You kind of will need if you're going to do multi-track records, you're going to need something to record multi-track with. But, and it is really fun. I love the beginning of discovering all this stuff. It was so much fun. I mean, like the first, I think the first thing for me, I had a little bit of experience at my high school and then I went to college and some of my friends were downstairs in the dorm and they were recording with the double cassette player. They would just like record something on a cassette and play from one cassette to the other. and plug a microphone into this tape deck and layer in the next idea. And they just flip the cassettes and keep going like that. And I just had this, I heard what they're doing. I was like, holy shit, how did you guys are making music? You're making songs? And then that kind of hooked me,
I never got to do that. And the whole tape thing and everything, I missed it barely. I got right in. The Pro Tools was early, and I'm kind of a little bit envious. I know it was painstaking, and everybody that I know that went through that was glad to be here. Seems like it.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
There was something fun about it for sure. I mean, it was fun to experiment and explore. And it's always fun to make music with some limitations on what you can do, because it helps guide your decisions artistically. If this is what you got to work with, you're going to have to make your decisions around that. As long as you are willing to make decisions and try and really do something cool, then it usually can turn out really cool.
Yeah. It seemed like in the very beginning for me, it was all about, once I saw that layering that Rob, did for our songs.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I wanted to work. But then, now I'm like all about, let's get as much stuff.
So wait, was
live.
Rob Zombie? Is that who you were recording with?
No, I wish. No, his name is Rob Dacre.
Oh, cool. Shout out to you, Rob.
Yeah. I doubt he's listening. I hope he is, but he was, he's quite a bit. He was, gosh, when I was 21 when we went in there, he was in his 40s. So, and I'm 42 now. So
right on.
He's I don't know if he's still doing it as intense as he was, but he just had it, man. He was a natural, he heard.
Sick of searching for the right cable or wondering how to hook up your studio? Trace Audio has you covered. Based in Nashville but serving studios everywhere, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, patch bay labels, and wiring solutions for home and pro studios. Try out the free online custom patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com to easily color code, label, and organize your XLR or quarter-inch bays, which are popular with home studios. It's sleek, professional, and simple to use. Then use the code RSR15 for 15% off printing and shipping your custom patch bay labels to take your studio to the next level.
Someone asked me a while back, do you fear AI will one day replace you as a mastering engineer? Well, it hasn't yet. That's because algorithms don't listen to music or to clients. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. When I master, I experience the music as your fans will, with the honesty of fresh ears. And unlike AI, I master with your intentions in mind, not merely to process the mix and boost the levels. If you want an experienced live engineer to master your music as only a human can, find me at soundporter.com.
Yeah, well, tell us about switching from Cakewalk into Reaper, because I've dabbled in Reaper and I actually use it. We use it on the podcast. We're going to be using Reaper for this very interview as part of our well, actually, maybe not on this one. Sorry, I take that back. When I do a live in-person one, I use it because it has this functionality that allows me to put markers on the recording. The recording is then called, quote, a broadcast wave file. And so those markers are embedded in there, and Reaper is the one tool that will extract them and put them on the timeline that we can then put into Pro Tools, blah, blah, blah. But what's cool about Reaper is that it just has a ton of functionality as a DAW and does stuff that other DAWs don't do.
You're absolutely right. And that was a big factor for me. I got to a point with Cakewalk where I forgot there were certain things. I was so comfortable and good at it because I did a lot of recordings up until I probably switched to Reaper maybe 5-6 years ago. But something happened and I can't really remember. I just finally, I think all the updates and changing company, I think Gibson bought them, and it was just getting weird for me. And I was so deathly scared to learn another. I was fast and I knew how to work around it, And me, it's I want to just get through. I'm recording rock bands. I don't need to do any sequencing and stuff. If I'm gonna involve that kind of stuff, I usually sub it out. I know some people that are really good at that stuff, and in my world, in the contracting world, that's what you do. You don't, I can go hack through and do the drywall here and it'll look like a hack did it. But I know I work with really great drywallers, and while I'm out doing my job, they're here and I'm paying them good money to do a great job, Same thing with audio. If I know a great drummer that would be great for the track, they're here, and I pay them well. And that's how you get a good product, I think. But
yeah. Now, what about finding musicians? If you're not in, LA, Nashville, and New York, do you find that it's challenging to find great musicians, or is it just like anywhere where you just have to get out there and you start learning who's who, and then you just call people who are available?
Yeah, I just call Lidge and I say, "Hey, Lidge, you got any good, any good drummers there in Nashville for a rock tune or for a country tune?" No.
Yeah. Do you work with remote drummers sometimes?
I work remotely. There's a couple guys in town that I use, but they have their own setups at the house, and I rarely go meet with them. They're we've been doing.
So they'll record it and then like just send it over to you, and you.
Yeah.
What about your process of making comments and changes to things? How do you address that?
We just over the phone usually, like we'll just send files back and forth. But honestly, that's kind of a rare thing. Most of the time I do track in here. The two other guys I use, one of them's Logan. Logan, that's in my band. We've been friends since, for 20 years. But he will come over here and track. I got a drum setup over here. And my room doesn't sound too bad. It's small, and there's a lot of cool things you can do to help your room. But I try to get them sounding as good as I can going in.
Well, we'll definitely jump in and talk and do more of a deep dive into drum sounds and guitar sounds and bass sounds, and vocals and all that. But before we go away from it, tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you made this jump from software that you knew really well. You knew how to move fast in it, in Cakewalk, for example, but you saw things that made you think, I think I'm ready to switch and do something different. So talk about it. If you got anything more to say about switching and dealing with that pain point, that's fine. But otherwise, if you want to talk about stuff that you really dig about Reaper, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, Reaper is, man. I think that the change for me was I got hung up on Cakewalk, and then I saw these videos from a guy named Kenny Joya. I don't know if the rock stars know him, but yeah, he's just a badass teacher. And he had a podcast too that it went for a while, and I forgot what it was called. Dang it was really good. It was with him, and like I feel like Will Kennedy was on there. It was great, but you could kind of hear Kenny talk on there, and I just liked him. I liked how he taught, and he has a really badass Reaper educational channel on YouTube. That really helped because I was like, okay, if I don't know what I'm doing, Kenny's going to cover it for sure. So I just jumped into Reaper and paid the $60. And I think what it did really well, I think I saw another video online where when I'm doing rock songs, I slip edit drums to more align them if the drummer's not. I don't like completely 100% grid them, but I just do a quick slip editing thing. I'll cut. I got a video on my YouTube channel about how I do it.
Oh, cool.
But it's you're basically just moving through the song and cutting and moving things around so where it's more timeline. But Reaper does it really awesome. And Pro Tools, probably there's a lot of people on here that are probably going to tell me how to do it on Pro Tools, but I couldn't figure it out. It was all, I didn't really like Beat Detective. I didn't spend a lot of time with it though. It's probably a great thing. But this manually editing for me is, I know that it'll take me a half hour, on average, and I know it's going to be right. I don't have to go check it. It's going to be right. And
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I did not realize. We'll add the link to the YouTube channel in the podcast notes too, Rockstar, so you can go check that out if you want to learn some of these tricks.
Yeah, I gotta say, I made some videos kind of quickly, and then like I said, it just became, man, making YouTube videos is hard.
Are you doing a bunch of YouTube videos? Do you have a active channel now?
No, I did it for maybe 3 or 4 months, but it was, gosh, I was starting my business, and I just I can't find any time to. I mean, I didn't realize how hard it is to make YouTube videos. To do them right now. It's pretty
hard. It's pretty hard. They're, I think, like anything, if you do enough of them, you get faster and you get a system going. But it's funny, just before we did this interview, I was down in the studio really excited because I just bought new lights for doing YouTube videos my control room. That's
Nice.
the problem with doing videos in studios, Rockstars, is it's all these dumb things that take up all the energy. It's like, oh, the lighting isn't right, and like my skin looks like I'm made out of cotton candy or some weird thing. It's just all this stupid stuff. Or like you'll shoot a video and you'll spend an hour explaining something with your screen sharing and all the sound going, and then at the end you try and put it all together, and like one camera is running a little slower than the other camera, which is running a little faster, and like two things that were supposed to be exactly 1 hour long don't even line up, and then you're pulling your hair out. So I understand. I'm with you, Tex.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I lost a few videos after spending 2 hours on them, and it just became pretty daunting. Kudos to the people that are really good at it, because I see there's some really cool channels out there, and I'm thankful for them. I tried it for a little bit. I tried some informational stuff that I was doing, but
any faves that you still watch on a regular basis?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. I kind of jump around. The music stuff, Kenny Joya's stuff is great. Warren's Hewitt's channel is great. Produced Like a Pro. Oh man, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, and then YouTube, they changed their method so that their algorithm changes. So like I'll find that I watch a lot of somebody, and then more recently I'm like, boy, I haven't seen a video from that person in a while, and I think it's just because YouTube just decides to feed me different stuff. So
yeah,
it doesn't really matter in the end, as long as I'm getting something fun to watch and it's educational. I dig it.
Yeah, Ken Andrews is the I don't know if people know who he is. He's the guy from oh gosh, what's his band name? I was going to say The Fragile, but it's not The Fragile. It's
right on. Well,
he's got a great channel too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I'll look that up. But let me let's go back to Reaper again for a sec. So, slip editing drums in there. Any other special tricks that come to mind right off the top of your head as far as like stuff that it does? Did you get into creating macros or any of that kind of stuff?
That was the next thing. The fact that Reaper, you can, just to sum it all up, you can tell it to do whatever you want. So what was really cool for me is I had a few functions in Cakewalk that I really liked. Like, for instance, I like to just hit R for recording, not Control R, not Alt, 3 fingers twisted one way. I like to hit one button, and I do it on the fly. When I'm recording bands, I know how to, like if there was a bad take, I Control Z and we're R, boom. And it's already back into the mode, the mode. So little things like that, you can just go in and create an action and say, instead of this, I want us to do this. Boom, done. And literally anything you can think of, you just tell it and you create an action for it and it does it.
What about like multiple steps of things? Like if you had to do 10 different things to make something happen, you can create that kind of thing as well as a macro?
You can. I haven't got that deep, to be honest, Lidge.
That's all right.
I get I should be better at it, but I have a system that I like to use, and it's very seamless with bands. And I'm going until I've run into a problem. I don't try to find a solution. I try to stay really, really focused on what we're doing, the tones we're getting. If the guitar player's playing it, it's my job to get into his head and understand if he likes a real tinny tone. Those are the things I really focus on. I've gotten proficient enough with Reaper, and it allows you to get proficient. Like I said, I'm solving problems with it. If I get hung up on something remotely when they leave, I figure out a system to get around it.
That's
Reaper
what I do too.
do
So I like to take notes to myself during a session. I'll keep a little notepad off to the side, and if I think about it, I'll be like, figure out this or create this for SoundFlow or something like that, and then I'll just come back and look at it later. Or like I'll remind myself to go learn a particular plugin. I'll just put it on my calendar.
Are you using SoundFlow?
I am, yeah.
They don't see. I talked at NAMM. I talked to the guys, and they don't have it for Reaper yet.
Oh, yeah. I guess maybe there's probably an app integration that needs to happen before it could work. But you could still get a Stream Deck, I bet, and just use it directly with Reaper. So if you've already got the key commands in Reaper, you could just have them show up on a Stream Deck with buttons,
Wow.
so that you're just hitting one button instead of, but then it's like But then at that point, it's sort of like, well, is it easier to hit a button on Stream Deck, or is it easier to just hit the three keys together on my keyboard to make the same thing happen?
But doesn't the Stream Deck has little icons, right? The tricky thing is, if Reaper, you're dealing with a keyboard. So, you got your...
You have to remember.
Confusing.
Yeah, you have to remember all these wacky key commands. And to be honest, to me, that's the kind of stuff. There's two things that make us hesitant to switch sometimes. One is having all this muscle memory for key commands, which I think of as back in the day when I would learn a particular game on like Sony PlayStation and I'd get really good at it. And I knew how to hit all the buttons on it. And then my buddy would be like, yeah, check out my game. I'd go play for 2 seconds. And I'm like, man, I can't do anything on this. All the buttons are weird. And moving is a different lever and whatever. So I think that's a thing that can make us not want to switch. And then the other thing that makes me not want to switch is there's an internal understanding. Like, I'm very spatially oriented, so I think about things in sort of it's probably why I went into architecture as a kid and like building stuff, is I think of things in sort of like a 3D context. I think of like, I know where something is. I know how to get from this point to that point. And sometimes different DAWs, Pro Tools has got its way of dropping a marker and editing and grabbing something and moving it. And other ones have different ways. And so that'll trip me up for a little while. But I also found that it was helpful to switch by choosing to start a new song in something else. Cause then like the pressure's different. Like it would stress me out intensely to try and do it with a client on a session. But if I'm just like playing around, then I don't mind. Like, then I'll be willing to like mess with it, do simple stuff and try things out. And then not so much today, but years ago, I remember discovering that it was like I had much better luck learning Ableton Live on a night where I was drinking and writing a song with a friend than if I wasn't. I don't know what that is. I feel like that was true for like learning how to speak French too.
That's awesome. I find that too. I like, especially by myself, if I'm coming down here and doing a mix, I like to have a nice IPA. We live in IPA land up here.
Yeah.
So
IPA is my favorite. I can't do as many of them now as I could, but I still love them.
Yeah, no, that's all good, man. Reaper's just, to sum it up, Reaper just allows you to be really creative and almost seamless. And that's, it's unfair to, I know Logic's great too. And to be honest, I'm a PC user and I have been for a long time. And I think my next computer is going to be a Mac and I'm just going to cross over just for, like when you're working with, bigger, if you're working with bigger people, as far as like sometimes you might work with another producer that's what they're working in is Logic. I want to be able to throw them the full session because most of these bigger guys, they have all the plugins. If they don't, they buy them. So, sending over bounced wave files or what consolidated wave files is kind of, it'll work, but it's all committed stuff and it's easier
too.
Yeah. And so not a whole lot of people that do it professionally. I shouldn't say that, but my setup, like PC and Reaper, is not a normal thing, I don't think. I think there's a lot of bedroom people that are doing it and maybe even above that. Like I still consider myself kind of a bedroom guy, because I'm not doing it full time. I wish I was, but.
Do you get in trouble if you sleep in the studio? Or do you sleep in the studio because you're in trouble?
Yes, there you go. I was going to say that. That's more accurate. But yeah.
Atom Audio is proud to announce the new D3V active desktop monitor system and H200 dynamic closeback studio headphones designed in Berlin and perfect for pro-level monitoring in a home studio setting. The D3V is a fully active desktop monitoring system featuring 3.5-inch woofers and hand-folded ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact form in elegant white or black finish. It's perfect for songwriters, engineers, producers, podcasters, and mixers with digital input over USB-C or balanced analog inputs, and includes a headphone output and DSP room acoustic switches. The H200 is Atom Audio's new closed-back studio headphone, featuring 40mm peak drivers and memory foam ear pads in a durable metal construction with a detachable main cable for dual-sided connectivity, making the H200s reliable for demanding studio use. With an impedance of just 32 ohms, they will sound great with your studio or laptop and include a plug-in for enhanced tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot. To see the new D3V monitors and H200 headphones, go to atomaudio.com. iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks or mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, referencing a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma Ozone RX or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show, aka Tex's favorite part of the show. And my guest today is Matt Tex Cokley, joining us from Southwest Washington State. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. I got it right, man. Astoria. Oh, no, that's where you were. That's where you grew up.
That's Oregon. Yeah. Yep. It's just above that and down the river a little bit. So,
you ready to jam?
I am ready to jam, man.
So you grew up in a log cabin. Were you inspired to try and have a log cabin yourself one day?
No, I wasn't. It was great, and it was a huge house, and it was we had a beautiful view of the river.
Yeah.
But man, there's cracks and crevices, and I'm not a huge spider fan, and I saw a lot of I saw a lot of big, dark spiders, and they were scary, hairy. So I said, nah, I'm done with this.
That's awesome. I'm so sick of spiders. In Tennessee, we got them like crazy too.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on. Let's talk about drums.
Okay. Love drums. The foundation.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you talked about having a house kit so you can record drums there. What kind of things have you arrived at that work for you in terms of getting a great drum sound in your home studio? And I especially like the fact that you preface it by saying it's not that great of a room or something. It's great to hear that because guess what? Everybody else listening feels the same way.
Yeah. So like Lidge said, I got 8-foot ceilings, maybe a little lower, 15 by 20, kind of square room. So you got to be very conscious of how live do you want it. When you have a square room like that, there's a lot of not so cool reflections, comb filtering. So, set up a kit. I have over here to my left, it's a 2 tom setup, a rack tom and a floor tom, kick and a snare. Those are the shells. And then, hi-hat, couple splash cymbals and a ride. Pretty basic setup. But the key for me is to set up the overheads, in whatever pattern you like. I go XY sometimes, and sometimes I do a spaced pair. But then I'm listening. I'll set the rest of the kit up, typical things. I have recently been doing a bottom snare mic, but I used to just do a top. because I do rely on samples heavily. I make my own sometimes. Every session I'm doing, I record, the shells by themselves, and I'll process them and then fly those back in.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I feel instinctively like drums are really the crucial thing in a lot of recordings. And I would think, and particularly in these heavy rock recordings too, because don't you feel like the drums, like if the drums are wrong, does it make it sound like it's kind of an amateurish recording?
Yeah. That's kind of the separator. And I got to say this, it does come down to your taste, and me growing up, I kind of touched on it. I was really influenced by the grunge early, the heavier rock, the new metal stuff. Even today, some of that's my influence, and that's how my ear hears this stuff. So I'll do whatever it takes to get the drums to sound how I think they should sound. Mm-hmm. It may not be right for somebody else, but usually the bands I record with, they're influenced by the same stuff. So I know where they want to be. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's about attack and length. And the length is the room usually to get the really big sound. I love roomy rock drums. I'm not at Ocean Way or, Sunset Sound where they have these iconic rooms. And so you got to kind of, you got to rely on different things to get that sound. And that's where my influence is coming from. So I'll set the kit up with that in mind. I'm trying to, depending on the song, sometimes I'll go from big rock, roomy sounds to like this verse needs to kind of almost mono up a little bit and tighten up, and we'll take those down. A lot of automation going on.
Can you get those sorts of sounds out of a small square drum room?
You can. And let me go back to me getting those overheads right, because that's where the majority of your kit sound is going to come from. And even though it's in a room, you can try a bunch of different things. Like I'll set up a really nice reverb, a digital reverb, mm-hmm. or I have a Lexicon reverb, and, whatever it takes to maybe send a little bit to those overheads, not too much. However you can make it sound more roomy. I set up room mics as well. I have an ISO booth over here that I'll set a mic in there and close the door to get it just more of like the less harsh sound, and blending those two things, the room mics and the overheads, and getting your kit to sound kind of how you want. And then I'll start putting in some samples that make sense with those and integrating those with my real sounds. And
so let me back up and say some of this back to you. So the overhead mics, if you're using like a close pair, so you tend to do like XY or something like that rather than like a wide spaced pair, right?
I'll experiment with a little bit of both, but it's mostly wide.
It is mostly wide. Okay,
yeah,
great.
It's mostly wide. And I take
back what I said.
I take once
and
I
that gives you what do you like about the wide sound? So for example, on let me see here. I have to jump through my notes so fast. There you go. Rust and Chrome, Liverpool, last September. One of the notes I wrote down was there's a great separation of the hi-hat and cymbals with the big room snare sound. Your answer might be like, oh, we didn't record that here, but whatever. Maybe you did.
No, we did. We did it all here.
That's great.
That was a spaced pair like that, and I'll set usually one of them up, and I'll measure from the center of the snare mic with a tape measure to the capsule. Mm-hmm. And whatever that is, I'll space the other one. I'll try to get it centered in the kit.
And what's the reason for that? Why would we want to have the snare the same distance to each one of those overhead mics?
When the drummer's hitting that snare, you want that signal to hit both those capsules at the same time, so they're as phase accurate as possible, so you're not losing any frequencies.
And also you might be, well, I guess it doesn't matter whether you're panning them or not, because you might also hear this in mono later, and you still want them to be phase accurate.
Yeah, you do. You want that snare, to me, in rock, powerful rock, the snare, the kick, matching with the overall sound. And they make a lot of tools that you can time align things, Sound Radix Auto Line is a cool tool. I use it sometimes to just see how far off I am, and then I delete it and move the mic until I get it more accurate naturally.
Clever.
I've tried to get everything in post-production, I don't like, okay, I got this big long list of fixes I got to do. It just takes me out of the creative. I like to push faders. I'll spend an hour on balancing, maybe hour and a half, to just get it to sound as good as I can static, and then it just makes mixing so much more fun for me.
Yeah.
I don't like doing a big long mix and then oh my God, I got to go fix this bass guitar. It's conflicting. Like, oh, it's not voiced right or whatever the technical thing is. I hate that.
Yeah. So let's stay on the drum thing, because this is great. Okay. So the spaced pair, you're being really careful about the distance from the snare. I guess, so one thing that's fair to point out, rock stars, is it's a little tricky to be exactly the same distance from the snare and the kick in each of the mics, because the snare and the kick are in different locations. But it is doable. Tricky. In fact, that's I even show that in the Rock Stars of Drums course that I do, based on the recorder man technique was where I learned it from. And it's sort of like a pivoting triangle thing, and you can do it with strings and everything. But it's really fun to. Did you make any videos about lining up your drum mics?
I didn't. I don't think I did. Gosh, I probably should though. That's a good one. And I spent a lot of time figuring that out, because that is super important, especially if you're the type of person that likes to start with the drums.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
Well, so critical. Lining up those overheads. Now, what about how spaced out they are to get the sound you're looking for? Are there any cues that tell you that they're too close together or too far apart? Like, are there things you listen for?
No, I just usually set them up at a pretty good angle. Maybe if straight up and down's 90, probably 60-degree angle where they're pointing down like this. And then I just eyeball.
So we can't see on the video, but Rockstars, he's sort of like, his arms are up in the air like overheads, but then his fingers pointed back in towards the center a little bit. So it's like, imagine if the mics are above the kit and spaced out, but they're pointing, they're aimed more towards the snare.
Yeah. I like to use the Shure, I believe they're the SM81s.
Yeah, those are great mics. I had one and it magically disappeared from the studio. Time to get another pair.
That's how great it was. It disappeared. Did somebody Kype it from you?
Well, I mean, I didn't give it away.
No, it's a good mic. I go back and forth between those, and I actually have two Audio-Technica 4040s. They're just those works good. They're not super harsh. I used those for a while, but I'm back to the 81s. Just seem to sound really good to me.
Yeah, so let's point out, Rockstars, those are small diaphragm condenser mics.
Yes,
and that's a crucial difference right there. You can mic up overheads with large diaphragms. I mean, there are some medium diaphragm choices. I think my Audio-Technica 4033 or whatever it is, I don't use it, haven't used it in a while. I think that one's actually a medium diaphragm, or small, like the SM81s. My Mic Tech C5s are small diaphragm mics, and they sound really great too. But wouldn't you agree, Tex, that each of these mics has a different tone to it?
Definitely.
So it's good to hear them and try them out, because you might prefer one versus another. Like it's personal,
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Those two, just based on the small diaphragm and large diaphragm, the large diaphragm seem to be a little darker, and sometimes I want a little more sizzle on the top without having to work hard to get it.
Right, and the large diaphragm can be really good in situations where you're trying to, like, maybe this is the way I think of it. Maybe the overhead, if I was going to do like a Glyn Johns technique or something, and maybe the overheads are meant to be the whole drum recording, like they're the main sound.
Right.
Then in those cases, I find sometimes the large diaphragms are good because they sort of capture a bigger sound of the resonance in the body of the drums themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. With the SM81s, I tend to roll off a lot of the lows and make up for it with the spot mics.
Right.
Depending on the recording. And then sometimes, just like what you were saying, you want to use that full range, and you'll choose your microphones, and that those are cues to how you choose. And then just blending in your close mics, to get more of a whole cohesive sound, rather than, some rock songs, you really need the kick and the snare to be very in the forefront, and you got to rely on samples to do that. And so you're kind of shaping your overheads. That's what I do, at least, is I shape my overheads first to get a nice coherent sound, and then start filling in with the spot mics, So.
Yeah, and so you've got these overheads spaced out, And then you mentioned room mics too. So it sounded like you were saying the room mics are literally in a different room from the drums. Is that what you meant?
I built a little vocal booth here to my right. It's tiny. It's probably 5 feet across and maybe 7 feet long with a door with heavy, it's probably 6-inch walls though. I'll put guitar cabs in there. I have another ISO room outside. It's called a doghouse. So I got from Gene the Machine Freeman. He's a great producer guy,
awesome.
A friend. We went and recorded with him recently, actually. And that's what he does. He has these separate doghouses that are separate from the building. He has 2 of them, and he puts mics in there and cabinets. So I got that from him. And so I have one to my left, and then I use the ISO room here to the right. Sometimes for guitar cabs, we want to do a stereo setup, but also vocals. So I'll put the room mic in there and barely crack the door a little, just to let a little drum come through, but it's killing your overheads, which, you know, if you can isolate, if you get a drummer that's really hammering on the cymbals, I'll first just say, hey, you know, I'll explain to them.
Don't hammer on the cymbals.
Yeah, like a good drummer that understands that hammers on the shells, but is really light on the cymbals and only emphasizes cymbals when they need to be, like downbeats, and, you know, that's great. But most of the time you're dealing with people that just want to bash the whole time. So combating that, you know, taking a lot of the sizzle off of the room mics is, you got to figure out ways to do that.
As a also part-time drummer myself, I realize that sometimes it's not the wanting to bash on the cymbals. It's just the not having the technique and control, you know, to hit everything exactly right and consistently. And with the stuff you're doing, it's so intense, the music and the drumming in particular, especially when you get into the fast kick work. That's a lot of elements to like perfectly coordinate.
It is.
Each hit, you know?
Yeah, the faster double kick stuff, you need to think about those decay times, you know, going into each other.
Yeah.
You can get that. If you use master bus compression, it'll make that thing work really hard, and you'll start getting a really pumpy mix. So you got to be clever about how quick. Sometimes your samples aren't these full range, you know, they're more short, clicky. Yeah.
All right. So we'll keep talking about the concept here. So with the overheads, we're really trying to get the full kit, and the cymbals particularly, we're making sure the cymbals sound great. And it's almost like, I would imagine the full kit quality is more like the sound of the drums in the room that you're trying to pick up, because that gives it the realistic quality when it's blended with these samples and stuff like that.
Yep, exactly right. Yep. That's the thing, is to try to get that performance and those sounds as good as possible.
Elevate your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your creative vision to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, crafting deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with unique sound design, Complete 15 has got you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound even further. Then, polish off your mixes with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11, included in the Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Empirical Labs, creators of the iconic Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio professionals. The Fatso, or full analog tape simulator and optimizer, brings the warmth of vintage tape and tube electronics to your digital recordings. Perfect for mixes, masters, or overdubs by adding harmonic generation, high-frequency saturation, tape emulation, and compression. The impressive new Pump, a 500 series classic knee compressor, shares its DNA with the analog Distressor and Arouser plugin. It features 8 selectable compression ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, a high-pass filter, and a first-time ever attack mod for added transient control, which is ideal for adding more snap to your snare drum. All Empirical Labs products are hand-assembled and tested right down to the circuit boards in northern New Jersey, USA for durability and performance, designed to last and be easily updated. Go to empiricallabs.com to find the Arouser and Big Freak plugins, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Remember to follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Let's talk about some of the core things like kick and snare, for example. So what are some ways to put the close mics on the kick and snare that tend to work for it? Before we even get into blending it with the samples, let's just talk about like what choices do you make on those mics, and what are problems that you can run into? Like, for example, can the hi-hat be a problem on the snare mic?
Yeah, absolutely can be. So I use on the snare, I use a pretty standard thing, SM57. It's kind of a new mic that just came out. But
right. That was insert joke here, right?
Yeah. I'm pointing it more towards, like, I get it almost underneath the hi-hat to deflect it, because the thing about an SM57 is it's very focused ahead of it, but it rejects really well behind it. And so you try to get the hi-hat positioned to where you're getting the least amount of bleed. And you
do you have to physically put the hi-hat up high so that the whole body of the mic can...
Yeah, Logan, the guy I work with the most, is just, he loves all his cymbals super low, so it's incredibly hard to mic.
Makes it really hard, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just so used to it, and then we're getting ready to record, and he'll be like, oh, yeah, I got to raise everything up. Now he's playing different, so...
Right.
But it helps me out a lot. But I found out, I got those, I think Shure makes these clips I've been using clips lately rather than stands, and they work pretty good. You can clip them onto the shells, and so you can get down really nice and tight underneath there. But I tell them, the further we can get the cymbals away, the more rejection we get.
Do you ever use those elbow 57s where they like do a 90-degree bend?
I've seen them, but I haven't used them.
Yeah, I haven't tried it either, so I don't know. No, and I don't know if it has the same rejection that a straight SM7 does, but that, of course, is the challenge. I mean, I said SM7, sorry, SM57.
Right.
But that, of course, is the challenge, is that the full length of the 57, that's a pretty long microphone to have its back pointed at the hi-hat.
Those clips I was talking about, they clip onto the shell, and then you can move them in and out. They have a little twisty thing that you can pull back and tighten them back up. And I'm usually aimed towards the center of the drum and pitched maybe slightly less than a 45, maybe closer to a 30-degree angle, aimed at the center. And I found that the more you tilt it up and get that steeper angle, the sound to me is actually thinner. I thought it would be thicker, but it sounds thinner. The more you pitch it down and aim it actually towards the center of the drum, it has a more full sound. And I only use 90% of the time, I just use a top snare. And if I ever want a bottom, I'll just drag a bottom snare sample in, because I don't know. I'm kind of an editing crazy man. If I love the sound of the feel of real drums, and I will make sure that sample, if it's the same velocity as the real snare, and I'll pull out 4 automation lanes and make sure that the input, so that thing has dynamics. I build the dynamics into it. Some people might think that's crazy, but that's how I build drums. I just spot mic it, and it sounds great. I'm usually like a 50 to 60% sample to real.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. So what are some of the challenges that we're going to find when we try to use our close mic and the sample, and how do we deal with them?
Well, you got to first and foremost is I choose my samples based on how the drum sounds. You don't want some, maybe you do want something wildly different. Could be but for me on rock songs, to make your kit sound cohesive, I try to choose samples that are complementing each other. And then you're playing with phase first. You get they have to be phase accurate. I'll print them out sometimes. I'll just print them and look at the waveforms and make sure, their polarity's correct and it's got the most punch, because a rock snare has to have snap, and for me, it's got to have some girth. It can't just be this tinny, like,
right.
It's got to have some body, some 200 in it.
But like, for example, if your live snare mic has mid-range knock to it or something, can you use a snare sample that has just got the high end and a different snare sample that's just got the low end, and then when you combine them, you end up with the snare you want?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do that constantly. Yeah, when you're micing your kit up, you got to be listening and back to the front of the song. Is this going to work with the song? And then exactly what you said, Lidge, building samples to fill in the gaps to make this full thing or shape it how you want.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
So do you sometimes find it surprising, the sample that you picked to accompany the snare? Because like by itself, it doesn't sound any good at all, but when it's blended in, it seems to fill in a thing.
Yeah, all the time. I have a bunch of samples I use. I'm a big fan of multi-velocity samples, and I don't have a ton of those.
Mm-hmm.
But
so what are the tools that you use for this? Do you use Slate Trigger, or is it something else?
Yeah, I use Slate Trigger. Reaper has a cool function. I forgot what it's called, but it basically detects all the transients, and you can fly in samples quick. But Trigger is 95% of the time what I'm using. Sometimes a combo of both of those things.
Wow. So Reaper will detect all the drum hits and then just make another track and just zip out all the samples as audio files right on a track that are lined up?
You can just have your file library, of all your samples, whatever, wave files, one shots, whatever they are. And I know it's D. You hit D, and it automatically, like if you're selected on the snare track, you hit D, it'll give you a threshold slider, and you can find just all the hits, and without cutting or anything, it just knows, oh, these are the ones that he's talking about, or she.
And does it play the sample so you can hear it as well?
Yeah, and you can just click as you're playing the track.
And you can flip through your library to see which one you like? Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And then if you like it, you can commit it, boom, and it'll make it as a new track, and you can just keep listening.
That's super cool. That's a great ninja tip for Reaper right there.
Yeah, and I'll use that in combination with multi-velocity samples to kind of get, like when there's
right, because
like
when it's doing the threshold one, they're all like one velocity.
Right. Yeah. So, and that's good for like, the standard like verse, right? You want that really constant sound, but when they get to a snare roll or something like that, it can't be, it's got to be nice and velocity sensitive. And sometimes I'll mute the one shot and just ride up the other multi-velocity one, or sometimes it's just the dry snare.
And when you do, so multi-velocity, that might be like the Slate Trigger or something that's got the different layers of snare sounds.
Right, yeah.
So that a drum fill sounds more natural. But would it be the same snare sample as the one shot, or does that not even matter so critically?
No, like I said, I'll mute it sometimes just on those parts, those critical parts. I'll mute the one shot. Because a lot of times when you're playing a really soft snare hit, nobody's detecting that you didn't, you did that, you made that move, right? It's still just, and then it'll come back up. And a lot of it's just listening, and I got a pretty keen ear when it sounds kind of fake, and I'll do whatever I can to get it to not.
So let's go to the other hard part about this stuff: low frequencies, kick drums. Yeah. What are the challenges we run into with triggers and samples on kick drums?
Phase again, like I said, I go back to my overheads that we spent a lot of time to get right, and I got to make sure that this is where I'll use Time-Align, SoundRadix's plug in there. I forgot what it's called. Gosh, Time-Align?
Yeah, I think so.
Auto-Align.
Auto-Align, yeah.
So I'll use that to get that, and then make sure that the kick and the snare are and sometimes I'll just hit the phase on one of them after I've time aligned it. It's a lot of playing around with phase until it's got the most low end.
But what's getting played around with? Are the overheads staying put and you're just scooting the kick around?
Yep, exactly. Yep, I'm scooting the kick to make sure, and then I'm bringing the level up to where it's got nice punch. And are we scooting
the mic on the kick, or are we scooting the trigger?
No, the mic is I use a Beta 52 right in the sound hole, halfway in, pointed right at the beater, and then I will stuff pillows or any kind of deadening agent to get it. Sometimes I want a quick snap, and you got to really stuff it and get both the heads dead or right. They're not resonant.
Basically not resonating, because what happens is, especially with the fast rock stuff, if you hit it and that head goes like doom. Even that long, it's way too long.
Yep,
right?
It's too long. Yeah, it'll just be your kick will be, whoo, it's basically with a little bit.
Because by the time you gain it up and compress it and bring it up in the mix, it sounds like in my dead room, I have to, if I don't go crazy deadening the kick, it sounds like an 808 kick drum by the time I'm done turning it up in the speakers.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Like in the room, you hit it and you're like, it's like, dunk. You're like, cool. Then you go into the control mode. It's like, dunk.
And sometimes that could be cool, but most of the time it's not for me. But there's no rules here. I mean,
all right. So the Sound Radix thing, the auto align is happening to which track? Which track is getting scooted around?
So let's go back to the overheads, talking to the kick. So I will put it on the left overhead. I usually put Sound Radix on there, and I put it as the detection. That's what everything's going to be based on.
That's the benchmark.
That's the benchmark. And then sometimes I'll put it on the overhead right and just see how close I am to phase. And usually when I do the measuring trick with the snare, they're right there. I mean,
those are locked in. They're good. Now the mic on the kick, that one has to be auto aligned sometimes and scooted around a little bit.
Yep. And depending on not every chord you have, I mean, sometimes the waveform will start going down. Right. And I try to get all my drums to where the waveform starts going up. So it's like a positive.
Like right when the hit happens, the first move is up, which means like Rockstar's translation, those waveforms you see on your screen, one way to think about them easily is they're literally your speaker moving towards you or away from you in that moment. So, if you think about it, you would want them all moving in the same direction, because otherwise your speaker's not moving at all. If one's telling it to move forward and another one's telling it to move backward at that moment.
Yeah, you're losing a lot of frequency, especially low end. So that's the first thing that's polarity. I want the polarity correct on everything. And then as far as time align, that's what that plugin does. It'll move it. It'll do both. AI tech, whatever's inside there, it knows what we're after, and it gets it as close as possible. I did see another guy do a cool thing. His name's Forrester Saval. He's a really badass engineer, producer guy too. But he uses it, and then he will detect it, and then you can actually click on whatever it tells you, like minus or plus samples, to detect how phase accurate it is. But you can grab that and pull it up or down and move it slightly forward and backward as you're listening, and it can sometimes even be better, because it is just a program that thinks what you're after. But you got to use your ear still. And when you got two, like the kick and the overhead, you can drag that thing up and down. And if it sounds better, a few ticks down or up, leave it.
Remember with that stuff, Rockstars, it's like any automated things, it's just a robot crunching, doing it based on numbers. And hopefully those numbers were originally based on what somebody thought sounded good at some example once upon a time. But in the end, you got to listen with your ears and Tex is saying, and just decide if you think it actually sounds good. All right. So now you've adjusted the kick against these overheads, but now we're also going to use a kick trigger or sample.
Yeah. Yeah. The kick, I rely on it heavily. I'll get
so
my
does that mean, but do we run the risk of having competing low frequency stuff that's canceling itself out if you try to use the natural kick drum and the kick sample?
Yeah, I run into that a lot. And you got to find the sweet spot. Sometimes it's 100% replaced. Sometimes it's 75. It's a thing where I start mixing and I'm like, that feels good. And I leave it. And then I move on and do more stuff. And I may come back to that when it starts bugging me. If things bug me, I just deal with them right then and there.
Yeah. We've definitely had guests on the show talking about, just replacing kick drums too. And it is it's one of those instruments that you can get away with.
Yeah.
In a drum mix. You can get away with just replacing it. With that said, and the reason is Rockstar's because I think a couple of things. One, because I think it's the low frequencies. It's sort of tucked underneath all the sound that has your attention anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think our ears paying attention to the mids and the highs and all that. And two is if you replace the kick drum with the sample, you don't have two versions of the kick drum potentially competing with each other in the low frequency phase and polarity like you're talking about, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep. It's tricky for sure.
Right. But sometimes you replace the kick drum and then it just doesn't sound like it's part of the drum kit anymore, right?
Right. Yeah, you know that right away. And like I said, I usually, for every session, I take samples of the actual kit that we're recording and I'll process those and I'll use that D function and maybe use that as my one shot. And,
cool.
And put that in with the real tracked one. And sometimes you can reinforce that. You still got the dynamics, but you got this underbelly constant thing that I've processed to get more and more snap. So you can do that.
So I was like asking these dumbass questions like, okay, if you're making the samples and you're going to trigger a sample of the kick to accompany, that comes from the real drum set, but it's also accompanying the real drum set in the mix. Is that sample like a complete mix of all the mics on the kick drum? Or do you find sometimes it's better to mute the overheads or the rooms and it's really just the close mics that are going into that, what'd you call it? The D sample?
It's the
one
function.
shot.
God, I forgot what it's called. No,
that's all right. That's all right. Whatever it is, the one shot. But what kind of sound do you find most useful? Just like a very close micy sound or something that sounds like a finished mix of the kick drum?
That's a great question. Oftentimes when I want a big roomy sound, I will blend them all. I'll blend my room mic and it's not equal volume. It's definitely more of the spot mic, but I'll push it up because sometimes you want that. Oof.
Right.
You need that a little bit of that length to get, if the rock song has a lot more space in between the kick, snare, and all the other shells, then a little length, I love that sound. I love a big rock sound. So I will bake that into there. And really, once you start putting it through the distressor and stuff, it brings that out and it sounds a lot more real. When you push that up with the real performance and you get more of that sound.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, are you using an outboard distressor and do you use that as part of your mixing too?
I actually just got it maybe 3 months ago and I have it set on a really cool vocal setting and I run vocals through it constantly, but there's occasional times where I will throw the room mic back through it. I always try it. Sometimes I track with it and it's just a mess, but it sounds awesome when you tuck it up in there. I haven't got a chance to do it on what we were just talking about, the samples. Right. I usually just process inside the computer.
Right on.
1176.
Yeah. Rockstars. I think you mentioned 1176 back there, but also the distressor. If you haven't had a chance to use the distressor Rockstars,
gosh,
it's such a great compressor. Dave Durr is a super genius. I have the Arouser plugin, which I use a lot, which is their version of the distressor as a plugin, and it's just incredibly powerful, and you can really reshape sounds in an amazing way.
It is. That is a piece of equipment that I would say, yeah, if you're starting up and coming and you want a compressor, get that one because that thing can do everything. And it's got, for rock vocals, man, it's got a crunch to it that it just sounds great.
So let's move over to those other instruments that are also in a rock song. Let's talk about vocals, rock vocals, because you're there. So I had a question for you about your vocal recording. I'm trying to remember which song I was picking out. Actually, I'll go to this one. So if this one is answerable, but Nothing Left, Forever, Dethroned. That record or that song is one of those super fast kick songs, but you've also got a scream vocal in the track. So talk a bit about some of the choices that seem to really work for doing rock vocals in your studio setting. Do you have a favorite mic? If you're using, do you have a mic pre that helps out? And then if you're using a distressor, what kind of settings are some good starting places?
Yeah, I gotta say for that particular one, that's a friend of mine in band. I didn't track the vocals on that one, but I'm okay. All right. I'm almost positive.
I'm always hesitant to ask a specific because I get that answer sometimes.
I'm almost sure it was through an SM7 for microphone, and I don't know.
That's cool. The other records in the discography, the Optica stuff, Rust and Chrome, those all have great vocal effects. So, talk about your vocal chain for recording there.
Yeah, it used to be probably 6 months ago when those records were going on. That was probably a year ago. SM7 into Warm Audio 1176. With a decent amount of compression. It's
no mic pre?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we go into a mic pre first, and then I patch bay in the 1176. Mic pre I have the Audient I believe it's the ASP 800 8-channel preamp. Cool. Pretty cool. I
have an old school one of those actually as well.
Yeah, they're great. And then I recently got the Warm Audio 412 preamp. So I have 12 channels. Into my Lynx Aurora, I got 16 channels of Lynx AES. Yeah, and then coming out of I believe those records would have been the ASP 800, the Audient, and then going into 1176 and 4-to-1, pretty aggressive, maybe 6 dB of compression, fast attack, fast release. Just the attack sometimes is a little bit less, maybe fast medium. And then
it's worth it to just sort of be aware of starting places and then be not afraid to mess with it.
Right.
When you're sound checking, because it really does, it changes things. When stuff I remember learning early on about recording through an 1176 was that if you open the attack up a little more, make it a little slower, it lets through some more of the details in the voice at the beginning of words, the fricatives, the consonants, things like that.
Right.
And then also the reverse could be true. Like if you had a vocalist that was a little too S-y sounding, sometimes shortening that attack to a faster attack can help cut off some of the S's.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I'm not hitting it super hard. It's pretty transparent. But what it does is those boxes impart a character that when you post-production and you start adding things to it, though all the transformer stuff that it was doing that may not be very listenable right away, it starts bringing that stuff up.
Yeah.
And it gets really gritty as I'll compress, I'll use another 1176 when I'm processing it for the mix, and it starts bringing that character up. It's pretty noticeable to me.
Yeah, it's great. So another thing that I notice when I'm compressing vocals is this can actually be a good reason to compress in your vocal chain when you're recording, is it helps you become much more aware of how much room sound you're getting on the vocal too while you're recording rock stars. So like if you're in a space where there's some room in there, you might not notice it if you don't have the compression on at first until you get to the mix, and then you might think like, oh man, that's a lot of room. But when you cut with the compressor, record with it on, then it at least gives you a chance to try and address that in the recording stage. You might put up more panels around the singer, or you might have the singer get closer to the mic. Do you have a setting on the SM7 you like? Do you use the low cut or the high frequency boost or anything like that?
I just leave it flat.
Just leave it flat.
Yeah, I leave it flat to capture everything, and then post is so easy to kind of shape that. It's pretty good how it is. I mean, I usually am cutting off some of the rumble.
Did you know that one of the most common fears with audio mastering is not knowing if your mix is ready or not? Look, nobody wants to send a mix in for mastering only to realize there's some resonating low end that's going on that wasn't picked up in the mix. That's where I come in. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. As soon as you send a mix for me to listen to, I'm already on your team. Mix feedback and master readiness is a service I offer for free and for good reason. That's because a great mix produces an even greater master. So if I can help you minimize oddities and issues and even provide some advice that will help your mix translate better, then mastering becomes more efficient and effective. And you don't stress about those issues at all. Just go to soundporter.com. There you can find videos, a FAQ, and a pre-mastering checklist on my website that will explain a lot of what you need to know. When you're ready for great feedback, just reach out via my low-friction contact form and send me a mix to hear. Again, you can find me at soundporter.com.
Are you sick of searching for the right cable only to realize it doesn't even exist? Or maybe you're asking yourself, how in the world do I hook my studio up? Well, say goodbye to those headaches because Trace Audio can get you wired up right. Based in Nashville, but serving studios nationwide and around the world, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, labels, and wiring solutions. From labeling your patch bay to wiring your full studio or large format console, Trace Audio does it all, whether you're a home or pro studio owner. And the real game changer is Trace Audio's custom patch bay label designer. It's a one-stop tool to color code, organize, and design labels for your 1/4-inch or XLR patch bays. No more wondering where things are on your patch bay, when instead you can have sleek, professional labels that are easy to read and easy to use. Try the free online patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com and use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom labels and take your studio to the next level. What's a good starting place for you on your distressor?
You know what? I gotta look. I just switched it to 6-1, but I'm usually on 10-1.
Yeah, that's the thing about the distressor Rockstars. There's so many options on there too.
There is. I think I got the high pass detector on. Let me look one more time.
All right, I'll fill in the gaps here. The 10-1 sound is one of my favorites. But of course, that is a pretty aggressive one too at times. And, you know, one of the things I like about setting compression is sometimes you start aggressive and then you're like, I don't know, it just sounds a little too processed. And all you really have to do is just keep backing the ratio down to lower ratio settings and it can make things start to sound a little more natural, you know?
Yeah. Also pushing the input up and down can, you know, if I like the
pushing into it more. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I'm on the Brit mode and then the distortion 3 mode. It's
right
pretty, it's adding a lot of character, but I like that.
Yeah.
When I'm doing vocals, the character it imparts for the stuff I do is like, oh, it's the best.
Yeah, so the distortion setting on the distressors is essentially mimicking analog tape.
Right.
Saturation too, so it gives it that quality. One of the places I've noticed when I mix and using the arouser is if I have a snare that just sort of sounds a little too plain Jane, you know, in the mix, even though I'm compressing it. If I just turn up that distortion a bit and find the sweet spot, all of a sudden it gives it that kind of crunchy, old school thing that makes it sound legit to me.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, same thing with the kick too. And you really have to listen for it when you use it, Rockstar. So in the plugin, you can, you know, adjust the amount of the distortion, which is really cool. On the hardware unit, you just turn it on or off and you just sort of push into it.
Yeah.
But it's very cool. Well, let's see, let's jump because we're about at the end of our rope here, but let's jump to a couple of things really quickly. How would you record bass on a session? Just give us your quick bass chain.
Bass is a DI. I just record a DI. Sometimes I have a Sansamp RBI unit, which is great. Sometimes I'll run that too. I'll just it actually has, you can plug into it and then just take a DI out of that. So I take both of them. Make sure phase accurate on those when you're mixing them. But
yeah, I got one of those.
And then I put I like that Neural DSP Parallax plugin on the DI. You can do a wide range of stuff with it. And I just blend those two until it sounds heavy. And then I'm very conscious with the kick drum and how that stuff's acting together. I usually solo the bass and drums once I get my kit sounding good.
So
Another
Neural DSP, that came up recently too. They make a lot of great heavy guitar plugins,
great
right?
stuff.
Yeah.
I can't recommend them enough. I mean, great stuff. The Soldano SLO100 plugin you can get it on sale for $69. I've never heard, I mean, they're to me by far the best amp sim plugin out there.
And do you find amp sims are really useful for guitars in your world as well?
I'm a tube amp purist.
Right, you've got your tube rectifier.
Yeah, I might be a little bit biased, but I do have both tools, and I shouldn't say biased because I love them both. If we're gonna get an idea down really quick, like I was just recording a guy yesterday, and he had a sketch of a song, and I just get that on, and he's instantly like, "Oh my god, that sounds so good!" And it's quick, But
now,
when
you say get that on, you're talking about using the real dual rectifier amp.
No, like if we're gonna get an idea down really quick on a driven sound, I just DI straight in and pull that Soldano up, and
gotcha.
1 minute we're recording and getting the idea out and staying in that zone. Yeah. But when we get a song that we really like and it's, we've rehearsed it and ready to record it, it's tube amp time. I got 5150s, dual rectifiers, some Marshalls or a Marshall.
Right. So tell us about, just give us a basic starting chain for how to set that up and record that amp.
Guitars.
Yeah. They got a guitar in their hand. Walk us through the sound going to the amp, coming out of the amp, going to the mic, into the computer, all that.
Okay, here we go. We're going to plug into the Mesa channel 3. We're going to double tracks. We're pan hard left and hard right. I'll get the AB box out on my pedal board, plug into the input. Channel A will go straight to the preamp for a DI signal. Channel B will go to the input of the amp or whatever pedals on the front end if they need. And then from there, I got a cord that runs into my ISO room. And I usually go a Royer R10. It's kind of like a poor man's version of the R121. And an SM57. And I'll usually, I got my speakers on my 412 cab marked out, or spots that I like to use them. And I'll get them in there. And the blend of those two mics, one has nice bite. The 57 has a nice bite, just off the center cone. And then I'll usually pick another speaker and put the R10 on there and make sure they're phase accurate and just blend those two together. And then actually, I just pulled this over here. Recently, I got this thing, which Rockstars, it's a radial mix mix 2-to-1, it's called. And basically, it just takes two signals, two microphones, and you can blend them together. And so that way I can just commit those two sounds to one track, goes to one preamp. So moving forward.
And does that happen after the mic pre's, or does that act as the mic pre straight from the mic?
I haven't did a recording with this yet. I've just messed around in here. I just got this.
Okay.
But it's when I record one pass of guitar is 3 tracks and then 6, 9. Sometimes I'll have 10 different passes of guitars. You start getting like 40, 50 tracks. I don't like that.
Yeah. So you're saying it's smart to blend them together.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, do you think when you use it, you'll blend them at line level after the mic has gone into their own preamp? Or you'll take mics straight to the radial DI box, blend them, and then go to one preamp?
Yeah. I take it to the DI box, and in my headphones, I crank it all the way up, and the level's about halfway, but then the output of this thing goes to one preamp, and then you juice it and you can hear it.
Okay, cool.
So you can juice it and then start playing around with the mix of it, and then you commit to that one signal.
So that's great. So that radial box will match up like a SM57 dynamic mic along with a Royer ribbon mic.
Right.
And let you balance the levels right there. So that's really hip. And then I guess, would it do a condenser if you wanted to do a condenser on there? Does it have a phantom power on it too?
You know what? That's a great question.
Yeah. That could be kind of useful if it would do that too.
It does not. It doesn't look like it does that, Lidge.
Yeah, so you might have to. Now, I will say I have one because I bought it years ago. I don't use it as often now, but you can get external phantom power supply boxes, Rockstar. So if you ever have a situation like that and you need to get phantom to this one mic before it hits the mic pre, you can actually get an external little phantom power supply.
I will say, the best way to do it, well, the more favorable way, I got this from Gene, is the Chandler TG2. It does this, except it has transformers and it sounds awesome and it blends it all in the box together. And it's got that's the high end version of this. This is the on the budget version.
Chandler, say the model again.
TG2, TG-2.
Yeah, the TG stuff is amazing.
Yeah, gosh, I couldn't afford it, but it's just a way of getting two signals into one signal, and you can blend it and monitor it and hear it before you commit to it.
Super cool. So, you could use something like that for your top and bottom snare mics if you wanted to, Rockstars.
Absolutely.
Or, another thing that I have done but almost never do because of limitations on inputs is top and bottom tom miking.
Yeah.
It's just something that like always seems to get blown off, but it's funny enough about miking tops and bottoms of toms is it's actually, I find it's in some ways it's more useful than the top and the bottom of the snare because there's a lot of tone that you can get out of that tom drum that way. But again, it's like if you've got a box like that, then you have an opportunity to blend them down to one track more effectively.
Yeah, I will say that has a 180 switch on it too. So when you're doing something like that, you can just pop that in and get the reverse polarity there. So
awesome. Let me go to another question real quick. Your mixes sound great. You've got this ability to take all this stuff like you've got all this heavy in your face guitars. Maybe some of them are nosy, to use a word you used. And you've got a low end that really sounds powerful. It sounds like you carefully made sure that guitars and voices weren't competing with the low end of the mix when you get there, because you want everything to have that low end rush in the, and that kind of heavy sound, right? Talk to us a little bit about what you do to make that separation, and then also tell us about your stereo bus when you're mixing. Are there things that does the whole band need to come together and just sort of bounce a little bit in an SSL compressor or anything like that to make the mix sound right in the end?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The low end is tricky. Just getting the kick and the bass to interact together. Sometimes I'll use a trick where I'm on the bass bus. Once I get my bass sound, I will put a compressor on there, just a Reaper compressor, and I'll sidechain it with the kick and get it to kind of pump a little bit. I want to hear the snap first. And when you start putting all the guitars and everything on top of that and vocals, that pump is kind of what you're probably referring to. I don't do it all the time. Sometimes the song naturally does it. But, and then as far as the master bus goes, I've recently kind of changed my, mixing. I got another bus that again I got from Gene. I call it a pump bus, and I only feed certain things in there, and I really slam it to where it's pulsing a little bit. It sounds ridiculous on its own, but you just pull that fader all the way down, and then I have a standard mix bus that I got made. It's sounding really good, but you start sliding that thing up, and it just starts. The low end starts like gelling but pumping.
Nice. That must be what I'm hearing in there.
That's kind of and then I do the same thing to the drum bus before all this happens. I get a parallel drum bus that I like to use the Kramer Pi compressor. There's a setting on there called aggressive room, and it's usually a little too intense. I'll back it off a couple clicks on the threshold to where it's giving you a lot of snap, but it's really getting that decay I was talking about on the drums. And then I'll pull that into my drum mix into where that's lively. And that's a cool fader to have, because maybe on the verse, I'll bump it down a little bit to let it breathe a little bit and be more tight. And then when we get to the chorus, I'll automate that back up and get it more bombastic. But all those kinds of like the pump bus and the room mics, those are cool things to automate up and down to get your mix to not be so static.
Right. So you give different qualities to different sections of the mix.
Right. The parallel compression is huge. And that's essentially, you're choosing things on the pump bus because you can get like a lot of bass instruments in there. And if you really hammer on it, it's treating them all the same. So sometimes you want the vocal or I'm sorry, not the vocal. The vocals don't go in there. The guitars, I like to, even though they're already compressed, I smash that through that thing. And so when you're sliding that fader up with the actual mix, I don't know if this makes sense, but when you're sliding it up, the pumping of it makes those guitars pulse a little bit too.
Yeah.
the kick drum is kind of triggering all that, but you don't want a lot of it. You'll know when you pull your mix fader down a little bit so you got a little headroom, and then pull that thing up, and your mix will come alive. And then
that's cool.
That mix bus I'm telling you about, the standard one, is actually just a track in Reaper. Then those two go to my actual mix bus that has the SSL on it. I got a chain. I use the Slate Virtual channel, and I put the emulation of the SSL on there first, and then the SSL bus compressor behind. I use the Waves one, and then I got this from Greg Wells, and it works awesome. I throw that linear multiband compressor on there. There's a setting on there called multi-electro mastering. Hit that, and then watch all those faders. You don't want them doing too much, just when they're all starting to dance a little bit. So you pull that master threshold down and then push it back up, and makes your mix come alive. It's a little cheat.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of when I started out at Alex the Great and Brad Jones and Robin. They had this thing called the Behringer Combinator, and we'd run through the same thing. And it was just 4 bands, and you'd see some compression and you'd see some limiting, and basically you just push your mix up until they were just licking those.
Yeah.
And then it made every mix sound so much better and more exciting.
It's like icing. It's like...
All right.
Yeah.
Sweet, man. Well, so let me zip to these real fast. We'll just hit these jam session questions real fast. Cool. You got a minute?
Yeah.
All right, cool. When you started out in recording, what was holding you back?
Oh, geez. What wasn't holding me back? That's a good question. Holding me back was probably just and it's still probably holding me back, is the hesitation to just dive in and go for it, because that's really, it took me a long time. That's how you learn is diving in. You can watch all the videos you want and read all the books and, do everything, but you got to dive in and get your hands dirty. And that's how you learn, Yeah. And so that was holding me back for a long time. I thought I could just read my way through this.
Right on. How about some of the best advice you remember receiving, or any quote that's inspirational, or anybody that inspired you?
Yeah, I would probably be back into the guy Rob I was talking about. He would just be very subtle about, and then the other guy, his name is Kevin Hahn, at Opal Studios. He was just like, giving me the encouragement that you're going to do this. I can see that you have it. You're interested. I was always the guy in the band that was more technical, like, oh, what's this over here? What's this doing? Yeah. And I think those guys just telling me, just stay the course and you'll have your own stuff one day and you'll be doing this. And I think that was huge for me to keep going,
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio using free and stock plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can use the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. For 15 years, I owned a famous MCI console that came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made many Grammy-winning records in the 1970s, and it sounded amazing. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to full digital mixing, I decided to team up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. This isn't just another boring plugin. The MBSI captures that same iconic sound that was used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, produced by Bill Simzik, Saturday Night Fever and Stayin' Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack soundtrack to Grease and was loved by legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik, to name just a few. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a high and low-pass filter switch. Features I always wished that the console had. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio, just like me. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound. Go to makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Now, how about sharing another recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use on their next session?
Oh man, do I have any hacks? Oh.
First thing that comes to mind counts.
Get your drums right. And I'm a huge advocate of samples, and just learning how to use those good and getting them accurate can really help your kit if you got a room like mine to really sound like what you hear. And all that stuff was recorded here. So don't be afraid of using samples no matter what people say. You're trying to make a song for the artist and the best possible. So just don't limit yourself. Just trust your ear that you've trained your whole life on your tastes, and try to get that out of those speakers any way you can.
Nice. Do you use reference tracks and things like that to make sure that you're retraining your ears as to what's possible with sounds coming out of your speakers?
Yeah, actually, let me go back to that last question. Here's a hack.
Yeah.
Get Sonar Studio Reference. I think it's called Reference 4.
Yeah.
If you got a room that you don't trust, and it's the most important part. The most important thing is to be monitoring correctly, because if you do have that taste we're talking about, you got to be able to hear that. If you're getting tricked, you'll be chasing your tail forever, no matter how good your ear is. You'll be going to the car back and forth. But that was a game changer for me when I got it, and I got a couple sets of monitors behind me. I got them all dialed in, and it even has headphone profiles on there. You got to know when you're flipping to each one that you're hearing things accurately. So get that. Trust me, if you don't have a room that's treated, it will treat your room in your listening position.
All right, 100% agree. I think it's okay and fun to not worry about your room when you're doing temporary studios and you're just sort of like recording and you're just creating and writing and you're just staying inspired. But the moment you want to start making decisions about, just do these sounds work? Is this going to work as a mix? Is this going to translate? You got to start hearing things correctly.
Right.
So next question. Favorite hardware tool, something that's fun to have on a session for you?
Oh gosh, it's got to be the distressor for me. I mean, and then my amps, amps are always very inspiring. When I plug into them, there's nothing like hearing a loud speaker in a room and just like, I just want to write. So
right on. Awesome. Favorite software tool or something you're just real excited about right now?
Favorite software tool right at the moment. Shout out to Jordan Valeriot. He has a company called Black Salt Audio. There's his silencer plugin for it's basically a noise gate, but it's a very intuitive noise gate, very simple to use. It just does especially for rock, what you want to. But it works on everything. But that's a great plugin. You guys got to check it out.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of video ads running. People just flipping out and going, listen to this gate. And the examples are kind of mind blowing.
It's great. He's there's a function on there for like ghost notes. When you come to they're doing some ghost notes, but then there's some good hits. You can like automate that thing in so you hear all the ghost notes.
Wow.
It's great. It's the best noise gate plugin.
So we were talking earlier about hi-hat in the snare mic. That would be a good choice for handling
it'll
that.
Eliminate it. It'll completely
the eliminator.
You got to check it out. It's great. It was kind of mind-blowing when I heard it. I was like, there's no way that it can be this good. Like, where did all that stuff go?
Shout out to you, Jordan. We're coming. We're coming for you, man. I can't wait to hear that plugin. All right, awesome. How about a resource or tip for the business side of doing this? If the rock stars want to do it for more than just a hobby, what do you want to tell them?
Well, I haven't made that plunge yet, but it's kind of you got to just stay the course of what you're doing and trust what you're doing, and turn out some good mixes.
Yeah.
For me, it's word of mouth, and it's working really I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. And right now I'm the busiest I've been, but you just stay the course. But if you do decide to get into the advertising of yourself, it can really, really help. But then just be, I run a business, electrical business that's in demand. And so you got to be on top of your shit. You have to keep track of your invoices, who's paid, what's owed to you, have a system for that. I got one for my business, but I haven't got into the studio yet. I don't have that much to where I have to get a system in place, but that would be very important. If I was as busy as I was in the electrical field and you're not organizing that end of it, it'll eat you up. You'll start working for free a lot. And
yeah,
you got to be conscious of your hourly rate. You might say, oh, I charge, let's just say $50 an hour to record. But if you're spending 4 more hours at night doing invoices and emails and stuff like that, that's chomping into your hourly rate because you're working, your time away. So now you might think you're charging $50 an hour, but you're really making 25, right? When you start adding everything up. So just be conscious of how you're running your business and yeah.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Did you ever figure out a smart way in your electrical business to keep track of stuff like that so that you could accurately come up with rates?
Yeah, for me, I'm a union contractor and we have a union rate. And so you have to use your, for audio, I guess you would have to maybe talk to some friends and see what rates are and what people are charging. You do a little poking, you can kind of get in the ballpark and then honestly analyze what you're worth, and kind of test the market. And, you might have to do some stuff for a little bit cheaper, but if you're busy, up the rate a little bit. And, because people will pay when you're worth it, people will pay and they want to come.
All right. How about this? How about a tip for the organizational side of stuff? How do we keep all our shit together in a studio?
Gosh, Lidge, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not the greatest at that.
All right, good enough.
But
we could probably all relate.
Yeah. Just take some time. Take some time out of your day. Like for me, I do have space in between projects and just clean the studio up and make sure it looks nice. I'm in disarray right now, but I have a session going on. That's no excuse, but just keep your stuff clean. I got my guitars over here and it really can do a lot. It speaks more for just keeping your sanity, clients, customers, artists, whatever, they come in and they see that and they may judge you on that, like, hey, this guy's organized and I trust him with our music, it could translate to a lot of stuff.
That's true. There is a perspective of the client you're going to work with and what their take on it is. I was just in my own head, I was thinking like, what are the things that because like you, I feel more disorganized than maybe I am. And like we probably all do. But then I'm like, well, what things do I feel like great about? I think one is knowing that if you've got a system for knowing where to find something in your studio, that's crucial.
Yeah.
And it ultimately doesn't matter what the system is as long as you know where it is and your assistant does or whatever. And then the other is time management. Like for me, it's just making decisions about like, here's my calendar, here's the work hours. If I got to do something, I put it in the calendar. I put it in, like if I got to do something tomorrow, I put it in at such and such an hour and I put them all in there. And and if they're really critical, line them up like where I'm doing this first, then doing that so you can see where they fit. And if they're just reminders, just kind of put them all at the same time in the morning and then just figure it out later.
That's funny. One of my really good friends is he's a real estate guy and he's very successful. And he always says that. He's like, I put it in the calendar. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's how I am too.
Yeah.
All right, man. Closing question. You've been waiting for it, Tex. We've been waiting for it. You know it's coming. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine and you get to go back in time. Find young Tex Cokley, AKA Matthew. I don't know how you guys were, how you were called when you were little, but you go back and you find young Tex and you say, listen, dude, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. That is not how you tune a guitar. No, you say, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you want to go back and give yourself if you could?
Gosh, what a loaded question. I hear it all the time and I still don't know the answer. No, to be honest, there's a lot of answers to this, but what comes to mind is, you know what? I was a poor listener when I was younger, thought I knew it all, not necessarily with audio, but just everything, and I see that in my own kids, and it's great. It's a natural thing. But if I could tap myself on the shoulder and say, just listen, let's just listen more, run into the right people and listen to what they're saying, not necessarily do it, but just absorb it. Don't talk over them, take it in. I just feel like my path in this world could have been a lot, maybe I would be doing it full time. So, just being a very, very good listener, and like Lidge, you're a great listener. You're very, like, every time I've talked to you, you take it in. You're very responsive. I don't know if I was that when I was younger. And I think that's vitally important, especially when you start getting around other audio people that are doing this, at a big time level. They got a lot to offer and they like people that listen, they like having a good conversation. And, I know for a fact when I was younger, I was a fast talker and, maybe I still am, but just being a keen listener can really expedite your, and people just like you more too. And that's a huge thing in this, is networking with good people in a non-networky way, just being genuine about conversation, and you can learn a lot. So, just being a better listener is what I would say.
I think a good reminder to us is that everybody likes for whatever it is to be about themselves. That's like our natural instinct, right? And when we listen to people, we let it be about them. And so that really does, I think just that process opens conversations, it opens doors, it opens creativity, it opens music, all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that I can think of that is kind of a know-it-all and they don't really know that, and they're kind of just talking over you and not a good listener. They're already thinking about what they're going to say next.
Yeah,
I can see that, and I just kind of, those are people that I tend to not really be around. So I just don't want to be that person, and I maybe at one time was, and I've been pretty conscious about it in the last decade or so. So I wish I would have had that a little earlier.
Right on, man. Well, dude, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Thank you so much, man. It's great to meet you. I'm not kidding. You're making great sounding records, and then to see your enthusiasm and meet you and Alex at NAMM, and just, see you guys having these great takeaways from stuff like this podcast, all the other wonderful YouTubers and channels that are out there and podcasts, and take it home to your studio to come back and share with us all these cool tips. I mean, we're learning from you. So let the rock stars know, like, where can they go find you online if they want to go check out more about you and your music? Maybe they're in that area, or even want to work with you remotely and they're ready to make a killer sounding heavy rock record or whatever other kind of record you want to make. Where should they go?
That would be awesome. First, thank you, Lidge, for everything you do for this community. You're an amazing guy, and been a pleasure getting to know you. And I'm looking forward to 2025 NAMM, or the next NAMM, whenever it's going to be. Who knows? It'll be
close on the heels of this podcast. We'll be marching towards it.
Yeah. So thank you for everything you've done. It's an honor to be here, and the pleasure's all mine. So if you guys want to reach out and say hi, talk, ask anything, just the socials. I'm on Facebook. I know it's kind of old, but I'm on there pretty actively. And what's the other one? Instagram. I'm on there. Those are probably the best places. Just Tex Cokley. If you search that up, I feel like I'm the only one, but
Cokley.
Cokley. I do have a
band,
website.
Opticus. OPTICUS. You can check it out. And then we got a playlist in the show notes too, Rockstar, so you can listen right now.
Yep. That's where you can
Sorry,
find
were you just sharing an email? I might have talked over you.
No, I have a website that, gosh, I've kind of neglected. It's poor. It works, but I feel like it's going to be going out soon. So the socials is honestly the easiest place. I respond within, I check it a few times a day. So cool. I respond within the day. So.
Awesome, dude. Well, Rockstars, thank you for listening and hanging with us once again. Tex, great hanging with you, dude.
Great hanging with you too, brother.
All right, man. I'll look forward to seeing you in person. And one of these days I'll be out that way and we'll come check out your studio.
Absolutely. I'll be out your way as well.
All right, man. Good talking to you, dude. Cheers.
Take care, man.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this show possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. At empiricallabs.com, use the code RSR10 for 10% off the Arouser and Big Freak plugins. And finally, use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom patch bay labels at traceaudio.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.